just found Kyle Radler, so I feel a little bit better. He knows. He's been getting my anxious emails about this for quite a while. Aaron Hadley dancing backstage, which is helpful. This reminds me of 6th grade, being on a stage like this when I tried out for our school operetta and unexpectedly got the lead role of Snow White. My parents were like, what? So talk about an imposter syndrome. My goodness, my dad, this is not actually in the notes. My dad has a family archive in the basement where he has a box for every family member. And in the Tiya box, there are photos of me as Snow White and the woodsman, Danny Grunstein, my first crush. I really, really hope that this archive never comes to light. Danny is, by the way, a pediatric surgeon saving babies' lives. Yeah. So I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I spent most of my growing up years in the Midwest. It wasn't until I was in my 20s that I went out west into the Great Plains and the Rocky Mountains. I was heading out there to teach at the Fort Belknap Indian Reservation Tribal College, and I remember feeling completely stunned and intimidated by that landscape. I felt like the mountains were going to just crowd in and swallow me up. And I had to develop a coping mechanism, which was I identified one tree on the prairie that I could know and recognize and say hi to as I went by, and that I could imagine that I would cling to if the mountains came for me. That was about 30 years ago, and I now feel like Montana is a second home, but it's not a place that's free of risk. I'm not afraid of the mountains anymore, but I am afraid of the grizzly bears and the people who have to hike displaying their multiple guns. People who move often feel a sense of disorientation and dislocation and vulnerability in their new environments, and I certainly did. My new book, Wild Girls, features a number of girls and young women who experience this very thing and who pushed past their fears as they moved into landscapes of struggle and landscapes of potential to change their lives and the lives of others. Mary Fields is one of those people, and she's someone I have a little bit in common with. Mary Fields was born enslaved in West Virginia, and after the Civil War, she moved to a convent in Toledo, Ohio. She was following the daughter of her former enslavers who went to that convent. And she worked for the Ursuline nuns there in Ohio for several years. She had her own room, she received pay, she bought things. And then the nuns were called to move to eastern and then central Montana to found a small boarding school for Native American youth. Mary Fields went with them, and she, alongside these nuns, founded the St. Peter's Mission School in a small town, or outside of a small town in Montana, called Cascade. At this school, Mary Fields kept a large vegetable garden, she kept hundreds of chickens, she hunted, she basically provided the food for everyone who lived at that school and studied at that school. And she had a great amount of independence and I think respect from the people who lived there. But later in her life, Fields was very cruelly displaced by a bishop who was in the nearest city to the mission, which was Great Falls, Montana. This bishop decided that Mary Fields was crude and that her language and her behavior were unacceptable. And so he exiled her from St. Peter's. When I came across this detail in my research on Mary Fields, I wondered, how is she going to make it? How was she going to make it in this harsh climatic and social environment when she was the only black person around, or at least according to the records, she was the only one? Well, she did make it by being bold. Mary Fields got a job with the assistance of the nuns working for the US government. She became a federal mail carrier, and she would take this, basically the wagon and horse back and forth between the city of Great Falls and the St. Peter's Mission, carrying mail and sometimes carrying passengers. So she wasn't exactly a stagecoach driver, but she was doing something in that vein. She would go 15 miles one way on these trips, and I looked it up to figure out how quickly did stagecoaches go. Turns out they went about 3 miles per hour if the terrain was hilly, 11 miles per hour if the terrain was flat, and 7 to 9 miles in between. So Mary Fields worked very long days. She was probably the only black woman or woman of color doing this work, maybe the only woman doing this work, because it was mostly men who freighted mail and passengers in the West. It really takes a great effort for me to be willing to go out to my front porch to bring in my Amazon packages and my boxes of Norton books. I usually have to call upon one of my teenagers to lug those in. And here was Mary Fields doing this work day in, day out, through all kinds of weather, in her 60s. She retired at age 70. So Mary Fields made a place for herself by establishing a relationship with her environment and then with people through the land. At the school, she basically took care of a farm to make sure that people were fed. After she lost her job at the school and was freighting the mail, she lived in the town of Cascade, where she had a garden of flowers. I've seen it. There's an archival photo of that garden. And she also loved to watch baseball games. And if a player on the men's Cascade baseball team scored a home run, Mary Fields would give them a hand-picked bouquet from her garden. She had an incredible ability to adapt to her environments, even as they changed. But that didn't mean that she was protected from harm. Mary Fields faced racism and sexism in her new home. Locals and journalists later writing about her stereotyped her. They called her Black Mary. They said that she was crude and rude and vulgar. They said she was trigger happy. They criticized her for wearing pants, which every photo that I've seen shows her wearing pants under her heavy skirts because it was freezing in Montana. And they also called her the mascot of the Cascade baseball team. But even as some people exiled and disrespected Mary Fields, other people learned from her and surely admired her. St. Peter's Mission was an institution that was founded to educate, quotation marks, which really meant culturally assimilate Native American children. And Mary Fields was with those children all the time, day in, day out when she worked there. And also, as you can see, or as you did see a moment ago in the photograph, when she visited, bringing the mail. We don't know what kinds of conversations Mary might have had with those children, if she told them about her experiences being enslaved back in West Virginia, if they told her about what it had been like to be taken from their reservations, or what they felt about being at a school that was intent upon changing them. But we do know that Mary Fields was at St. Peter's at the same time that a remarkable Blackfeet student named Josephine Langley studied there. Josephine Langley left St. Peter's as a star pupil, and she went on to work at a school called the Fort Shaw Indian School. This was the shiny, new, extremely strict, militaristic federal boarding school in Montana. At Fort Shaw, Josephine Langley formed a girls' basketball team, which would be a championship team. This team, made of Indigenous girls from across Montana and also Idaho, played numerous teams in Montana. They also played teams from Missouri and Illinois, and they beat every single one of them. They did. The Fort Shaw Indian School girls basketball team was named the champions of the world at the St. Louis World's Fair in 1904. I wondered, as I was doing the research for Wild Girls, if this could be coincidence. And I thought, probably not. Can't prove it, but Josephine Langley spent time in the place where Mary Fields was caring for and tending to children. They both loved sports. They both loved sports involving balls. They both loved the outdoors. And they were both bold. Recently, I retraced Mary Fields' route. And I was putting it on my GPS, which got lost a few times. My heart was just pounding, as my GPS had no idea where I was, and neither did I. The place is still rugged, it's still vast, it's still highly unmarked, and I thought about Mary Fields being there. Mary Fields driving that wagon with her horse, carrying passengers mile after mile in the snow and the cold and the wind. Mary Fields, who wouldn't have had maps and had very few roads. And I thought about how this place is vacant now. It's nearly in ruins. The memory is almost lost. But Mary Fields is someone we can remember, we can hold close as we consider the road ahead and think about what it means to move boldly forward. Thank you.